So picture the Australian outback for a second.
Okay, I'm with you.
Out there, male jewel beetles are, well, they are literally trying to mate with discarded brown beer bottles.
Right, the classic beer bottle beetle. It's
It's
wild.
completely wild. They will just bake in the hot sun, like completely ignoring actual female beetles until they die. And why? Because the bottle is what biologists call a superstimulus.
Yeah, exactly.
It basically takes all the traits the beetle evolved to look for and, artificially magnifies them to a lethal extreme. And the reason we're starting with these poor beetles today is because we're going to explore how your smartphone, your dating apps, and honestly, your entire career are doing the exact same thing to your brain.
Yeah, that's a really stark comparison, but it's so accurate.
Right. So if you are listening to this and feeling utterly exhausted by modern life, just, overwhelmed by notifications and constantly feeling like you're falling behind, you are definitely not alone. And more importantly, it is not your fault.
It really isn't. I mean, we have
Yeah.
this huge tendency to internalize that exhaustion as a personal failure.
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm just lazy.
Exactly. We tell ourselves we just lack discipline, or, we need a better morning routine, or we should just be able to handle it all because everyone else seems to be handling it.
Right.
But the root cause is much deeper than, like, a calendar management issue. It is a fundamental friction between our ancient biology and the modern world we've built.
And that right there is the core mission for our deep dive today. We are pulling from this really fascinating paper by Jonathan H. Westover, PhD. It's titled The Evolutionary Mismatch and Competition in the Polycrisis Era.
It's such a great paper.
It really is. So we're going to give you a shortcut to understanding the invisible forces making you so tired. And we aren't just going to admire the problem. We are actually going to dig into the evidence-based ways you can hack your environment to fix it.
Yeah, and to really grasp this, I mean, we need to define the environment we are currently trying to survive in. The paper frames our current reality as a polycrisis.
Right, a polycrisis.
Yeah, so this isn't just, a tough economic year or some disruptive new app. It is the simultaneous convergence of climate instability, massive economic shifts, hyper-accelerated technology, and geopolitical stress.
Basically, everything, everywhere, all at once.
Exactly. These forces, they compound on each other. But to understand why our brains are seemingly short-circuiting in response to this polycrisis, we have to look through the lens of evolutionary mismatch.
Okay, let's unpack this. Evolutionary mismatch. So we're talking about the disconnect between the biology we were born with and the world we've built around ourselves.
Yeah, that is the foundation of it. I mean, our psychological and physiological adaptations were forged over thousands of generations in very specific ancestral environments.
Right, like hunter-gatherer times.
Exactly. For almost all of human history, we lived in these small kin-based groups, navigating natural habitats with very stable, predictable social roles. But modern life, extreme urban density, global digital saturation, a 20 and 47 news cycle, it is incredibly novel. Evolution moves at a glacial pace, right? But human culture is just sprinting.
Right.
And this creates something the paper calls adaptive lag.
Adaptive lag. So basically, our biology is just dragging its feet while technology breaks the sound barrier. It sounds like we're running a million-year-old operating system on brand new hardware. The software is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, but the environment is making it crash.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. Yes. I mean, think about our dietary cravings. The classic example is the human sweet tooth.
Oh, yeah, the bane of my existence.
Right. But in our ancestral environment, sweetness was incredibly rare. When our ancestors tasted something sweet, like, say, ripe fruit, it was a highly reliable indicator of safe, high-calorie energy.
So it's basically a survival jackpot.
Exactly. The biological instruction was simple. If you detect sweetness, consume as much of it as possible immediately because, well, it might not be there tomorrow. That instinct kept us alive.
But fast forward to today.
Right. You walk into a supermarket and you are just surrounded by refined sugar. But the instruction manual hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
Your brain still screams, eat it all to survive the winter. But in a modern environment, that exact same survival mechanism leads straight to metabolic disease.
The environment completely flipped, but the software is exactly the same. And, I mean, this leads us right back to those Australian beetles. When I was reading through this paper, the animal examples were just mind-blowing.
The beetle is such a perfect illustration of the first pattern of evolutionary mismatch. It's called an input intensity mismatch.
Okay, input intensity.
Yeah. This happens when a modern environment takes a natural cue and artificially amplifies it. So the male jewel beetle evolved to seek mates based on very specific cues. A certain golden brown color, a specific glossy shine, and a particular size.
And the beer bottle hits all those marks.
Oh, it turns out a discarded dimpled brown beer bottle reflects light in a way that perfectly mimics those exact cues, but massive, hyper-intensified.
Wait, so the beetle isn't just a little confused. To the beetle, the bottle is basically presenting as an impossibly attractive 10-foot-tall supermate.
Yes, exactly. The bottle triggers their evolved preference so intensely that the beetle's mating mechanism is just completely hijacked. They will literally climb onto the glass and refuse to leave.
Wow.
Yeah, they totally bypass real, biologically appropriate mates in favor of this hyperstimulating mirage.
That is, I mean, it's tragic, but it makes so much sense. The input is just dial up to 11. But are there cases where the cue isn't just exaggerated, but like completely replaced by something fake?
Yes, and that brings us to the second pattern, which is called input replacement. This is when a totally novel stimulus substitutes for an ancestral cue, and it triggers a behavior in the completely wrong context.
Like what?
Well, moths are a prime example here. Over millions of years, moths evolved this brilliant navigation system based on the faint, distant light of the moon.
Right.
By keeping the moon at a constant angle in their vision, they could fly in a perfectly straight line.
But then humans came along and invented the street lamp.
Precisely. And a street lamp emits light that the moth's navigation system processes as celestial light. But, and here's the catch, because the lamp is close and radiates outward, trying to keep it at a constant angle causes the moth to fly in a tighter and tighter spiral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, until it literally exhausts itself or just burns up against the bulb. The moth isn't broken, His navigation system is flawlessly executing a million-year-old code. It's just that the environment is providing a counterfeit input.
So the moth is following the rules, but the game is completely rigged.
Exactly.
And the third pattern from the paper, it seems to be the most subtle, because the input isn't even the problem, right? It's the physical world itself that changed.
Yeah, we call that output misalignment. This occurs when the organism is functioning perfectly. The input is totally correct. But because the physical environment has rapidly changed, the resulting behavior is suddenly harmful.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Think of migratory birds. They use magnetic fields and celestial cues to follow ancient flight paths that have served their species for countless generations.
But now we've built massive skyscrapers covered in mirrored glass right in the middle of those ancient highways.
Exactly. The birds are doing exactly what they are supposed to do, flying their ancestral routes. But their evolutionary history never required them to develop a visual mechanism to detect an invisible, solid barrier suspended hundreds of feet in the air.
Right.
So the output, which is flying south for the winter, results in a fatal collision simply because the physical stage has been altered.
It's like agriculture is, barely 12,000 years old?
Yeah, roughly.
And industrialization is about 250 years old. The internet, as we know it, is just a few decades old. In evolutionary time, that is less than a blink of an eye. So physiologically, we're literally still hunter-gatherers.
Yes, we are.
And this is where the paper took a turn that genuinely shifted my perspective. Because it's one thing to understand birds hitting buildings or, beetles loving beer bottles. Those are physical mismatches. But the core argument of this research applies this entire framework to our social lives.
It does. The paper introduces a concept called the social evolutionary mismatch and competition hypothesis, or same MCH for short.
The CMCH, got it.
The foundational idea here is that while physical mismatches, like sitting at a desk under fluorescent lights all day, harm us physiologically, our social mismatches do something uniquely insidious. They massively, artificially intensify our perceived level of competition.
Okay, let's dive deep into how this social mismatch actually functions, starting with, how our brains perceive the sheer number of people we interact with every day.
So we start with something called scale calibration. Human brains evolved to manage and comprehend social networks of roughly 150 people. Anthropologists call this Dunbar's number.
Right, 150 people.
Yeah, and in that ancestral setting, your status, your value to the tribe, and your sense of self were calibrated against a very small, manageable group. If you were an average runner or a decent storyteller, you had a place. You had value.
But today, if you play the guitar, you aren't just the guitar player for your village. You open an app and immediately watch, like a 6-year-old prodigy on another continent playing a masterpiece with their eyes closed.
Exactly. And your brain is not equipped to understand that the 6-year-old prodigy lives thousands of miles away and isn't actually competing with you for local resources.
Right.
Our social evaluative systems still process population-level information as if it were locally relevant. So your brain perceives this massive, unmanageable amount of global talent as direct, immediate competition. You instantly feel inadequate because the scale is completely broken.
Man, we're swimming in an ocean, but our brains still think we're in puddle. And the paper points out that it's not just the sheer number of people, right? It's the quality of the information we are getting about them.
Yes, and this brings us to signal validity breakdown. In our ancestral past, status was based on actual observable competence and generosity.
Yeah.
It was virtually impossible to fake being a skilled hunter or a reliable caretaker in a group of 150 people who literally watch you every single day.
They'd call your bluff instantly.
Exactly. Status cues were authentic and high cost. But today, status cues are incredibly cheap and entirely curated. What's fascinating here is that our evolved mechanisms treat modern, fake signals as highly reliable because historically a signal was always reliable.
Oh, wow.
Think of someone renting a luxury sports car for an hour just to take photos for their social media profile, or using a filter to digitally alter their jawline.
Which happens constantly.
All the time.
Oh.
These are counterfeit status markers.
Okay.
But when you scroll past them, your ancient brain processes those images as high-fidelity evidence that you are surrounded by incredibly wealthy, impossibly attractive peers. And it tells you that you are plummeting to the bottom of the social hierarchy.
But wait, I have to push back on this. Because consciously, I know the photo is filtered. I know people rent clothes or cars just for engagement. If our logical, rational brain knows it's a counterfeit signal, why does it still make us feel terrible? Why doesn't our logical brain override the mismatch?
That is such a good question, and it gets to the absolute core of our biology.
Yeah.
The answer lies in something called the behavioral immune system, which operates heavily on an overperception bias.
Okay, how does that work?
Let's look at it through the lens of survival. In nature, a false negative, like failing to notice a real threat, say a venomous snake, is fatal. But a false positive, jumping away from a stick because you thought it was a snake, that only costs a few calories.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. Our subconscious threat detection systems evolved to be hypersensitive. So even when your modern logical cortex says, hey, that influencer's vacation is clearly staged, your ancient limbic system says, I cannot take that risk. If that status threat is real, I could be ostracized from the tribe and die.
That is wild.
The logical override is simply too slow and evolutionarily too weak to stop the visceral biological release of stress hormones. Your brain forces you to feel the inadequacy just to ensure you stay hypervigilant.
So it's basically hitting the alarm bell just in case the rented Ferrari actually means I'm going to starve. And the worst part is the alarm bell literally never stops ringing.
That is the third mechanism, exposure duration. Ancestral stress was acute and episodic. You had a conflict over resources, your body flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, the conflict ended, and the stress hormones dissipated. You return to baseline.
Right.
Today, digital connectivity means we are chronically exposed to status cues. Social media, email, 24-hour news, it's a continuous, unrelenting drip of performance feedback and peer comparison.
We are perpetually marinating in cortisol.
We literally do not get a chance to recover. The systems in our brain that adapted for occasional acute stress are now permanently engaged, and that leads to deep systemic burnout.
So, if our ancient brains are being tricked into thinking we are constantly competing with millions of perfect rivals and the stress never ever turns off, what happens to us? How do humans react when they feel completely cornered by this fake competition?
The paper introduces a behavioral framework based on two factors. First, surmountability, meaning, do you feel like you can win this competition? And second, autonomy, do you have the freedom to walk away?
Okay.
The reactions to this pressure are wildly different, but entirely predictable based on those two factors.
Let's start with the people who feel they absolutely must compete, but the threshold for success feels impossibly high. The paper calls this competitive escalation.
Right. When individuals feel they must secure status in a market that appears entirely saturated with perfection, you see an explosion of extremely risky behavior.
But we're kind of
Well, the perceived threshold to just be average is so distorted that normal effort feels useless. This psychology is actually what drives the surge in speculative investing people throwing their life savings into volatile crypto day trading or meme stocks, hoping for an impossible leap in status.
Oh, wow. It's the feeling of working hard and saving won't get me a house anyway, so I might as well bet it all on a digital coin.
Precisely. It also drives the phenomenon of going broke to look rich. People are taking on crushing consumer debt to buy luxury goods, attempting to signal a level of wealth that matches the hyperinflated superstimuli they see online. They're bankrupting themselves just to project an illusion.
It's the human equivalent of the jewel beetle.
Yeah.
We're literally destroying ourselves to chase a beer bottle of fake wealth. But what about the other reaction? What happens when a person looks at this massive global arena and concludes, there is no way I can possibly win this game?
That triggers the second major response pattern: disengagement and withdrawal. This happens when the competition feels totally insurmountable, but the individual feels they have the autonomy to simply stop playing.
And we are seeing this everywhere.
We are seeing a massive global wave of this right now. In China, there is a powerful cultural movement called Tang Ping, which translates to lying flat.
Lying flat.
Yeah, young professionals are actively rejecting the relentless, grueling corporate rat race, and they're opting for minimalist lifestyles that require barely any income.
And in the West, we've been calling this quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting is the exact same mechanism. It's doing the bare minimum required to maintain employment without expending a single ounce of extra energy.
Right.
We also see this manifesting as a profound apathy toward traditional milestones. Marriage, homeownership, climbing the corporate ladder. These are increasingly reframed not as aspirations, but as massive sources of unmanageable stress. In Japan, this withdrawal reaches an extreme with the hikikomori phenomenon, where young people completely isolate themselves in their bedrooms for years.
I really want to reframe this for a second because this changes everything for me. When older generations look at younger workers and accuse them of quiet quitting out of, I don't know, laziness or a lack of moral fiber, that's completely wrong, isn't it? It's actually a biologically rational withdrawal from an unwinnable game.
From an evolutionary perspective, yes, it is a brilliant conservation of energy.
Wow.
Your internal sociometer, your gauge of social standing, is scanning the environment. If it determines that the hierarchy is simply too steep to climb, expending massive effort is biologically reckless. Disengagement is a protective mechanism.
It's self-preservation. And this protective mechanism doesn't just impact our careers, it bleeds deeply into our personal lives. The data the paper presents on mating and fertility is genuinely shocking.
The global data is staggering. Fertility rates are dropping below replacement levels in almost every developed nation on Earth. And this SMCH framework explains the biological mechanism driving this.
How so?
Think about modern dating apps. They compress thousands or millions of potential partners into real-time, highly visual, rapid-fire comparison sets.
Which totally breaks that Dunbar number scale we talked about earlier.
It completely shatters it. And this creates profound choice overload. The human brain was not designed to process an infinite catalog of potential mates. It paralyzes our decision-making. Furthermore, it creates a dynamic of hypergamy, which is the evolutionary drive to seek a partner of equal or higher status.
But because the apps only show the most curated, filtered, top-tier profiles, our baseline of what is average gets warped.
Exactly. The perceived standards for a mate become wildly inflated. The illusion that a flawless partner is just one swipe away makes people incredibly hesitant to commit.
Because they think they can always do better.
Right. It delays pairing, increases relationship instability, and ultimately drives down fertility. The environment is signaling to our biology that the competition is simply too fierce and the resources too scarce to settle down and invest in raising a family.
So what does this all mean? We are wandering around with ancient hardware, bombarded by fake digital signals, our birth rates are plummeting, and we are either risking our life savings on crypto or quietly quitting our jobs to conserve energy. I mean, it paints a fairly bleak picture.
It does sound heavy.
But Westover's paper doesn't just drop this heavy realization and walk away. It pivots to actionable solutions. Since we obviously can't evolve faster, how do we actually hack our environment to fix this mismatch?
The paper outlines highly practical, evidence-based antidotes. The overall goal is to reduce the environmental mismatch and buffer the perceived competition. And one of the most immediate biologically powerful interventions is intentionally increasing our engagement with nature.
Okay, nature.
We have an innate evolved affinity for the natural world, which researchers call the biophilia hypothesis.
The paper links this directly to attention restoration theory, and the concept of soft fascination really stood out to me. Can you explain how that works?
Absolutely. The modern environments we navigate, staring at spreadsheets, navigating dense traffic, scrolling through data, require what is called directed attention.
Which is exhausting.
Extremely. It is effortful, it is top-down, and it rapidly depletes our cognitive reserves. But natural environments offer soft fascination.
Like watching a campfire or, I don't know, seeing leaves move in the wind.
Yes, exactly. It's a state where your brain is gently engaged by the environment, but you aren't forced to work to maintain that attention. It allows your directed attention to completely power down and recover.
That makes a lot of sense.
The physiological evidence for this is incredibly robust. Classic studies in hospital settings have shown that patients recovering from surgery who merely have a window view of trees heal faster,
Mhm.
require less pain medication, and have fewer complications than patients looking at a brick wall.
Wait, really? Just looking at a tree physically alters your healing process? That is incredible. But, we can't all just move to a cabin in the woods. What about our digital environments? Do we have to smash our smartphones?
No, and this raises a critical point about realistic interventions. The paper notes that reactionary blanket bans on technology rarely work.
Yeah, people always find a way.
Exactly. For example, when governments attempt to ban social media for teenagers, it almost always leads to illicit workarounds. Plus, it ignores the reality that technology provides vital benefits, like access to global information and connection for isolated individuals.
Right, so the answer isn't to become a Luddite and pretend the internet doesn't exist.
The intervention we need is algorithmic recalibration. We have to redesign the spaces we inhabit. On a personal level, this means auditing your digital inputs. We need to prioritize platforms and feeds that connect us to our strong, real-world social ties, rather than distant, hyper-curated influencers.
Okay.
And crucially, we must hide popularity metrics.
You mean the visible follower counts and the like buttons?
Exactly. Those are the numerical superstimuli triggering our status anxiety. By curating smaller digital networks that more closely align with Dunbar's number and removing the raw metrics of comparison, we can drastically reduce the scale calibration mismatch. Your brain feels safe again.
Let me make sure I'm capturing this for the listener. So the goal isn't to throw our phones in the ocean and move to the woods. It's about auditing our inputs. It's asking, am I consuming a whole food version of social interaction or the ultra-processed version?
That is a brilliant distinction, yes. A messy, rambling group text with 5 of your closest friends is a whole food. It nourishes your tribal biology.
And the ultra-processed.
Doom scrolling, a professional networking site filled with humble brags and curated career milestones, is ultra-processed. It spikes your anxiety and leaves you malnourished.
I love that.
And beyond the digital space, another major structural intervention the paper suggests is expanding our valued social roles.
How does that work in practice?
Right now, society funnels almost everyone into very narrow, zero-sum economic competitions, the singular corporate ladder. But we can diffuse that immense pressure by culturally normalizing portfolio careers.
A portfolio career. So where your identity isn't just tied to your job title.
Exactly. A portfolio career derives status from a diverse mix of paid work, community volunteering, creative hobbies, and caregiving. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, there were many ways to be valuable.
Right, you didn't just have one metric of success.
When a society genuinely respects and values diverse paths, it lowers the perceived scarcity of status. If you don't feel like you have to win the one singular game everyone else is playing to have worth, your evolutionary threat alarms finally turn off. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the takeaway here isn't that we are nostalgic for caveman days. Modernity is incredible. We have doubled human lifespans, we have medical miracles, and global violence has massively declined over the centuries.
Right, we definitely don't want to lose the antibiotics or the indoor plumbing.
We want to keep the progress. The goal of this entire framework is to enjoy the massive benefits of modernity without the severe evolutionary friction. It's about intentionally designing our digital spaces, our workplaces, and our daily routines with human biological constraints in mind.
This has been such a profound shift in perspective. To summarize this entire journey for you listening, we are essentially ancestral beings trying to navigate a brand new polycrisis. Your brain is reacting exactly the way it was designed to, but the inputs you are feeding it are completely counterfeit.
Beautifully said.
Recognizing these evolutionary mismatches, whether it's the lack of soft fascination in nature, the paralyzing choice overload of dating apps, or the fake, ultra-processed status signals of social media, is your ultimate superpower. Understanding this biology allows you to stop blaming yourself for feeling burned out and start actively hacking your environment to support the brain you actually have.
The friction you feel is a design flaw in your habitat, not a flaw in your character. Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to consider as you step back into your day. Take a hard look around your immediate environment, the apps resting on your home screen, the metrics you measure your success by, the physical spaces where you spend your time. Ask yourself, Are you curating a habitat that supports your ancestral brain? Or are you surrounding yourself with modern superstimuli? What beer bottles or street lamps are hijacking your attention today?
That is a perfect place to leave it. A huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep auditing your inputs, keep searching for those whole food connections, and as always, keep questioning the world around you. We'll catch you next time.